You were held today, or fed, or comforted. In 20 years, you won't remember any of it. Not because the moment didn't matter, because your brain was never going to let you keep it. This isn't a flaw. This isn't a glitch in your development. It's one of the strangest design choices in the entire human brain, and almost nobody stops to ask why it's there. You call it baby amnesia. Scientists call it infantile amnesia. No exceptions. And for over 100 years, nobody could explain it. Think about your own life for a second. Try to reach for your earliest memory. Most people land somewhere between age 3 and 4. Before that, there's nothing. Not darkness, not fog, just an absence, as if that person wasn't you at all. But here's the strange part. Babies remember things constantly. They recognize their mother's voice within days of birth. They learn faces, routines, smells, sounds. Their brains are absorbing an almost unbelievable amount of information every single hour. So the memories are being made. Something else is happening to them later. Sigmund Freud was the first person to give this phenomenon a name, back in the early 1900s. He called it infantile amnesia, and he had a theory. He believed the missing years were repressed, buried by the mind because they were tied to uncomfortable early urges and conflicts. It was a tidy story. It fit his larger theory of the unconscious perfectly. It was also almost entirely wrong, because here's the question Freud never really answered. If those memories are just hidden, shouldn't there be some way to bring them back? Hypnosis, therapy, deep recall under the right conditions. Decades of research tried, and decades of research came back empty. The memories weren't hidden, they were gone. This is where the real science begins, and it starts with a psychologist named Rovee-Collier. In the 1980s and 90s, she ran a series of experiments on infants using something almost embarrassingly simple. A mobile hanging above a crib, connected by a ribbon to the baby's ankle. Kick your leg, the mobile moves. Babies as young as 2 or 3 months old figured this out fast. They learned the connection, they remembered it. But when Rovee-Collier tested them again weeks later, something specific happened. If she gave the baby a small reminder first, a brief glimpse of the mobile moving on its own, the memory came flooding back instantly. Without that reminder, it was as if the learning had never occurred. What she uncovered was that infants absolutely can form memories, detailed ones, lasting ones, even. The problem isn't storage. The problem is retrieval. The information goes in. Something about the way it's filed makes it almost impossible to pull back out later, using the adult mind you eventually grow into. So why would evolution build a brain that stores memories it can't use? The answer sits inside a part of your brain called the hippocampus, and this is where the science gets genuinely fascinating. Named from the Greek word for seahorse, because of its curved shape, the hippocampus is your brain's memory indexing system. It doesn't hold your memories forever. It tags them, files them, and links them so your adult brain can find them again on demand.
Here's the catch. In infancy, the hippocampus is under construction. It is nowhere near finished. New neurons are being produced there at an extraordinary rate, faster than at almost any other point in your life. That sounds like it should help memory. It does the opposite.
A neuroscientist named Paul Franklin, working out of the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto, ran a series of studies on this exact puzzle using mice. His team found that high rates of neurogenesis, the birth of new brain cells in the infant hippocampus, actually disrupts existing memory circuits. New neurons wire themselves into the same physical space where old memories are stored. In a sense, the growing brain is quietly overriding its own early filing system again and again, faster than the memories can stabilize. When Franklin's team slowed neurogenesis down in young mice, the animals kept memories longer. When they sped it up in older mice, the older mice started forgetting like infants again. So the very thing that makes a baby's brain so extraordinary, the explosive growth, the flood of new connections, the sheer pace of development, is the same thing quietly erasing the record of that time as it happens. You weren't unconscious for your first 3 years. You weren't uninterested in the world. You were building the fastest growing brain you will ever have, and the cost of that construction was the memories themselves. There's a psychologist named Patricia Bauer who has spent decades studying exactly where the transition happens. Her research shows the fade isn't sudden, it's gradual. Children between ages 2 and 7 don't just fail to form early memories. They actively lose ones they had. Ask a 4-year-old about something that happened at age 2, and they often remember it. Ask that same child again at age 8, and it's gone. The memory existed. Then the machinery maturing around it slowly dismantled the pathway back to it, which raises an uncomfortable question. If this happened once, in the years you can't access, is it still happening in ways you can't see? Your brain today is not the finished static thing it feels like. It never really stops remodeling. Neurogenesis continues at a slower pace in adulthood. New connections form, old ones prune away. Somewhere in that constant rebuilding, memories that feel permanent are quietly being reshaped, softened, edited, without your permission and without your notice. That's the modern mirror in all of this. You already know memory is imperfect. Most people accept that. What's harder to accept is that the imperfection isn't a failure of the system. It's the system working exactly as designed. Forgetting isn't the opposite of learning. In your first years of life, forgetting was the price of learning as fast as you possibly could. So when you try to remember being held as a baby, being fed, being comforted, and you come up with nothing, that isn't loss in the way it feels. It's evidence that your brain was so busy building itself, so occupied wiring the very mind you're using to ask this question right now, that it never had the luxury of keeping the receipts. You were there. You just outgrew the version of yourself that could look back and prove it.